This is Jennifer Pepito with the Restoration Home podcast. This is the show where we talk about cultivating a flourishing family culture through life-giving habits. Today on the show, I'm so excited to be talking to Abby Kuykendall. She is the author of the new book, Let the Biscuits Burn. And it's all about hospitality, about learning how to reframe hospitality, not as some kind of a Pinterest perfect production, but as a spiritual discipline rooted in love, welcome, and transformation. I'm so excited to be chatting with Abby today. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. This is going to be a fun conversation.
It's going to be so fun. So you have a new book. It's all about hospitality, not as like this perfect production, but as a spiritual discipline. And I love that concept. I wrote a book called Habits for a Sacred Home. There's a whole chapter in there about hospitality because it was one of the ways that the Benedictines transformed culture by kind of having open doors, but still keeping up their beautiful routines. And it's one of the ways that we can bring restoration to culture as well through open doors. But that means we can't be perfect. How do you figure out that balance between, like, I told my husband, we're having guests on Friday night that have never been at my house. I'm like, this week, can you hang a chandelier, blow the outside, and clean the carpets, possibly, please, pretty please?
Yeah, no, I totally get that. It's such a hard kind of mental load to carry between I want this to be perfect or I need all the details to go off smoothly. And I also just need to focus on the people. And, you're so right in how it is how the early church was known. They were known for their hospitality during the Black Plague. It was the church that stayed behind and took care of the women and the children and the sick. And so I think in the same token, we need to adopt that type of lifestyle and make it, like you said, a really good habit. And it starts, in my opinion, it starts really small. You have to take some really small steps into forming that habit. You can't just start running the marathon tomorrow. You have to start with the couch to 5K. You have to start walking and then work your way, progress your way up to the big moments. And so I do think that when we refocus ourselves and we recenter our environment, not around the tablescape, not around the food or having enough food or it being perfect, but when we recenter ourselves to like, I am doing this so that the people that walk into my home feel loved, feel known, and feel seen, that is when we can truly adopt a lifestyle of hospitality.
I think that's so good. And I think it's more than ever a need because online is so fake. Like anymore, you don't even know if an image is real or not. I talked to an app developer the other day and he's like, if you want live videos in your app, we can make a clone of you that gives the message. I'm like, oh no, this is terrible. Like, what are we coming to as a culture when you don't even really know if anything online is real? What we're coming to is more than ever a need to be real people in real life community. And, I think partly that starts with our kids. I have seen so many people who, they get the evenings all so busy. Their schedule is so tight that they don't even have a moment to just sit around and chill and talk with their own children. How can families like develop a little more margin where they can be real people in real community?
Yeah, it starts by placing the importance on the table. If you value, um, you know, the evening news, or if you value extracurricular activities, and I'm not saying that there's anything bad with either of those things, but when you value those and start to place those on top of the family meal, research goes to show that if you sit down with your family and have a family meal 3 times a week, I'm not saying every day, but 3 times a week, your kids are going to be better behaviorally. They're going to be better be better in school studying. They're going to be better socially. And so like there is something to the table that we forget and we don't give enough credit to. And so when you are busy, when you are chaotic, when you don't have a rhythm to recenter your life around, like hospitality, it becomes haphazard. You forget about it, you don't focus on it. And so if you do have kids, involving them in the family dinner, whether that's setting the table or saying the prayer that night, or I know that my sister with her 4 kids, they take turns, and Monday night is somebody's night, and Wednesday night is somebody's night. And not to say that prayers have to be rehearsed or a certain way, but that just gets them in the mentality, and it builds the discipline of praying before a meal. And you, as parents, it's our job to disciple our children. It is our job to train our children up. And one of the ways we can do that is by involving them in some of these moments and some of these habits of hospitality that that help us make it more of the center of our home, instead of, you know what, we usually eat dinner in the car, or we eat dinner on the go, or everyone eats it in their room or on the TV tray or whatever. It's just the table is just so important.
Yeah, I love that. It's, one of the best so many of the best memories that I have with my family have happened in these kind of more quiet times around the table. But I love also like the spiritual discipline of hospitality because the conversations that can really change lives often come up when people are in your home. We in the Restoration Home community, we just had a mom mention how some of the things that she's learned from just observing conversations even in our community were then a message she could give to a mother in her community who was struggling. And so, we just don't realize how these conversations that we're having in person with people are making an impact on their lives, on the way they think, on the way they parent, but it has to happen. So, what do you say to those moms who are like, I'm so busy? A lot of our moms listening, they homeschool. There's, homeschool curriculum all over the table. They're trying to manage meal prep and keep their kids or multiple kids fed. How can they invite in more people to feed?
Yeah. One of the ways that I have instituted this in my own home, because I'm a stay-at-home mom. I work from the house. And currently we are under renovation in our home. And so you might think a mattress in your kitchen and scaffolding in your living room, nobody's entering our house. But it is a way that we can practice what we preach. We practice inviting people into our mess. That is usually the most vulnerable way to connect with people. Dr. Kurt Thompson says that, people at their core, he writes in his book, Anatomy of the Soul, that people at their core just want to be known and loved and seen. And so I think when we start to focus on knowing people and loving people, then we make that our focus. We make that a priority, and we know in our lives, we teach this to our kids. You will do, if it is important to you, you will get it done. You will make it a priority, and you will get it done. And so, for the mom or the dad who's listening that has homeschool paperwork all over the table, or the house is a mess, or they have 7 kids and it's just chaos in their home, it's a small step. Start small. It is a yes in obedience to hospitality, because scripture, this isn't coming from Abby Kuykendall, this is coming from scripture. When Paul writes, we need to practice hospitality, and it is so important that we do just that. We practice it. Now, if you're on a basketball team, you might practice every night, but some teams practice once a week. If you're on a rec league or something like that, like, it doesn't have to be every day. It doesn't even have to be every week. It could be, we are going to start small, and small. What we have capacity for is one night a month. That is, or one night a quarter, whatever your capacity is, but it is about building the muscle of hospitality. You talked about hospitality being the spiritual discipline. A lot of times in church culture, we hear hospitality is a spiritual gift. And I write in Let the Biscuits Burn that it is not my spiritual gift. It is not something that comes naturally to me. It is not something that comes easy. I really struggle with conversation, especially around the table for some reason. And so for me, I always have like this security blanket of conversation cards that I'm like, oh, okay, there was a dead 5 minutes there. So now let's break out the conversation cards. And I will break out those conversation cards and I will start using them as a tool to help me conversate. Now, if your, hurdle in hospitality is time, okay, let's look at the calendar 2 months in advance and let's plan the day. And maybe you need to plan, a blessing hour, the hour or the day before, and say, we're going to have a blessing hour where we clean the home to bless others. And so you start integrating this discipline into your children's lives. And so they know, okay, you know what? Once a week or once a month, or we have a blessing hour or a blessing day where we clean the house so that we can invite people over. And I don't think that that's bad necessarily. I don't think that you have to sit there and say, when I say let the biscuits burn and it's not about perfection, God is in the details. He loves details. Look at the sunrise, look at the mountains, look at our world around us. He loves details. But in the same vein, he tells Martha, don't worry about the details. Mary has it figured out. Sit with your people. And so there is a pull and a tug there that we want it to be good. We want it to be perfect. But at the same time, it's all about the people. So get a laundry basket, put all that homeschool stuff in the laundry basket, think about it tomorrow and invite people in.
Yeah, that's such good advice because there is a balance there. Like, on the one hand, we are called to be creative. I love Edith Schaefer's book, The Hidden Art of Homemaking. Like, we are called to be creative. We are made in the image of God who is always making things better. And so there is this calling. Like, I'm looking right now, I'm podcasting in my garage and there's like cobwebs all over my garage exterior door. I'm like, what is wrong with me? Why are there cobwebs everywhere? And so there is this like, on the one hand, we've got to be making things better. But on the other hand, when you're raising small humans, this is your time to keep the small humans alive. Like, this is not necessarily the time to have perfect Pinterest decorations. And, I mean, really, who does it matter to anyhow? Like, are your kids going to love you more? Is God going to love you more if you decorated perfectly for fall? No, but if you can have a reasonably clean house, and maybe when your kids are little, that means getting a robot vacuum or having a biweekly house cleaner come in and do deep cleaning on the bathrooms. Like, maybe it means even getting a little bit of help. We bought this like super light vacuum cleaner that even a 5-year-old could operate. Just get out of the box. And the Restoration Home community has a lot of great tips for sort of even integrating children into some of those amazing practical life skills. Like,
Yeah.
learning how to tidy up is a practical life skill that's going to serve them into adulthood. But also just open the doors, and my favorite, honestly, is drop-in company, because you get over right away,
Real
you get
fast.
over that embarrassment. Do you know what I mean? It's like, okay, here we are. This is not perfect. This is real life. And then you get into deeper friendship when you as a mom are always making things so perfect when people come over. You might actually be inhibiting deeper friendship by making those people feel intimidated. I've had friends like that where I'm like, I love these people so much. I admire them. I'm inspired by them, but also don't drop in at my house.
I love that you said that about drop-in company because I write in Let the Biscuits Burn about your non-negotiables, and I never leave the house with my non-negotiables not completed. So my non-negotiables are that every toilet in our house is flushed, and that seems like a super low bar, but we have little ones, and you just have to make sure that everything is clean so that if a drop-in guest does come over, you don't have to worry about the toilet. My second non-negotiable is that the sink is empty. So when we have a habit in our house that when we finish our dishes or when we finish a meal, the dishes go in a dishwasher. If you find that dishwasher is full and you can't put your dishes in, sorry, it is your day and your time to clean that dishwasher out. And then my last is that I love a good throw pillow, but what happens with throw pillows is they land on the floor. And so inevitably I will wake up in the morning or I will try to leave the house and I have 6 or 7 throw pillows on the floor. And I'm like, why can we not just pick up the pillows? And so my non-negotiables, the bathrooms, the sink, and picking up the throw pillows and putting them on the couch. And I just feel like, you know what? If those three things, those are my non-negotiables, but if those three things are taken care of, I can feel somewhat okay with a drop-in guest.
Yeah, that's so smart. I love that having those like 3, non-negotiables or having a morning and evening house blessing where you just
Yeah.
assign that being like, "Hey, let's just run around really quickly and pick things up because dad's coming home or friends are dropping in," or whatever the thing is. And that is one of the other things I love about hospitality is it does sort of it creates some accountability.
Yeah.
I also love this about co-ops. I feel like homeschool co-ops, showing hospitality, these things create some accountability because it's easy, especially for homeschoolers, to get into kind of like tunnel vision where you only sort of see your family and what's in your lane. But when you invite people in, there's also this opportunity to have some perspective, to have, when my parents come over, I've talked about this before on the show, when they come over and they're house sitting for me or they're watching my kids and they start cleaning out from under my kids' beds, I'm like, "Oh, I guess I should have done that." And so having some perspective when you bring people in, and this is something I think a lot of younger people can tend to, I don't wanna generalize here. I think it can be easy to be like, "Oh, I'm not gonna have those people in because they criticize me. I'm not gonna have those people in because they gave me feedback." Like, often people who give you feedback, it's just because they love you. And so shelve it or use it, but don't get offended by it because a deep relationship, a really good relationship, iron sharpening iron relationship is often gonna come with a little bit of feedback.
Yeah. I was actually having a conversation with a friend the other day about the resilience. Sorry, I'm from Arkansas. So if you hear the accent come out every now and again, she does come out.
I love it.
But I was talking to a friend about resilience and how our culture, I'm a millennial, and even like the Gen Z, and I'm sure Gen Alpha at some point coming up behind them will have this resilience issue, and that we don't have resilience in relationships anymore. My grandmother has is 93, and she still has friends calling her and celebrating her and checking in on her that she's been friends with for 60 or 70 years. And I think about like the friends I have in my life, and it's like I have friends or people all the time in my life that say, you know what, I just don't have capacity, or something happens in the friend group and people leave because they got their feelings hurt. It's like my grandmother would have no friends if that was the case. She is a bold woman. She speaks her mind. And I'm sure there have been more than a couple of hurt feelings in her life, but she pursued relationships beyond the hurt feelings because, like you said, iron sharpens iron. Like all of that, all of those navigating relationships, that helps us become one, more empathetic, better friends ourselves, better communicators, and that benefits us in every relationship. And so it does make me really sad, to your point of like, you know you might get your feelings hurt, or they might be direct, or they might give you feedback, but that's okay. Like, use that as a stepping stone and a relationship builder in that relationship, and don't just stop having people in or inviting people in because you're afraid you might get your feelings hurt. Have a little bit more resilience than that. But I will say that scripture talks about biblical hospitality, and that in Jesus says in Luke, I believe Luke 8, and he says, this is me paraphrasing. He says, "Do you want a pat on your back for inviting your friends and your family over for a meal, or showing hospitality to your friends and your family? Even my enemies do that." And his point was, I want you to invite the person that doesn't think like you, that doesn't look like you, that doesn't vote like you, that doesn't maybe teach their kids like you. I want you to invite those people in, because that's when you can truly show my love, extend that to others. And I try to think about that constantly because I can get so comfortable. How about you? I can get so comfortable in my own community, in my own people, with my own stuff. And I'm like, I don't ever invite anybody in. And it's like, No, 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 no. That is not what God has called me to do. God has called me to like open the doors wide. And I'm like, "Ugh." But sometimes that is uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I think, depending on your neighborhood, like a lot of our lives we've lived sort of out in the country where we didn't have neighbors, but our last home, we had great neighbors and we are very different. Like, conversations have come up that show how different we are. And yet these were really special relationships and just, we would have like a glass of something on the porch. One of them would bring us fruit and vegetables from the farmer's market. I mean, they were just incredible neighbors and it was an incredible opportunity to get perspective on life. And, when you're in person with people, there's just so much more encouragement that can happen than if it's always, online or even just a quick sort of pass through. I think so many social ills would be solved if we just started inviting our neighbors in.
I know I was talking to someone recently and I said, "Oh, do you know your neighbors?" And she was like, "They have dogs." And I was like, "Okay, if you're not watching this, if you're just listening to this," she made kind of like a stink face of like, no, I do not, I do not associate with dogs." But I just thought that was so funny that we can't look past someone's animal preference and invite somebody in for dinner or invite somebody over for coffee or something. I was like, okay, I'm not asking you to dog sit.
Yeah, and there could be so many things, like, they have kids, they don't have kids, they vote
Yeah,
differently, they do medical stuff differently, like, there's so many things that divide us right now, but I think we're gonna be a lot safer as a country in some ways if we start getting to know each other and understanding each other instead of just judging from afar, so I think that's
yeah.
such an important point just to, really open the doors to people you don't know, but here's the one thing, I have heard of too many stories of kids getting molested while there were company, like while people had company over. I know this, I just went really deep there, but in our
And
family,
it's so good to talk about.
we did have some boundaries, like, we would have no kids playing in bedrooms, like, people could play outside, they could, we had, like, a living room and a family room situation, but we really didn't have any bedroom play. We had doors open, and we would check on our kids every once in a while, like, it's easy when kids are playing and everyone's having fun to be like, "Oh, it's all fine," but I'm not talking about even, like, inviting somebody who is reprobate or something over. I'm
Yeah,
talking about, like, good Christian people, and then they find out later that those good their kid did something to their kid, and this is not a judgment even on the people whose kid is the predator in this situation, because when that happens, someone's probably already preyed on them, but it's
right.
just an admonition to be aware, like, don't just get involved with what's going on in your kitchen and forget to go check in the bedrooms.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that that's such a great a mental note to make aware of those things because we can take situations for granted and we can lose sight of just the safety of our family. And that needs to be top priority when you're inviting people in, especially if they aren't your friends and family, if they are, the people who don't think, look like you, vote like you, whatever, like we need to be on guard in those situations. And so going ahead and setting up those boundaries before, in my book, Let the Biscuits Burn, that was actually the hardest chapter for me to write. I wrote a book on, or I wrote a chapter on boundaries, and I wrote about spiritual, physical, and emotional boundaries in hospitality because it can be so easy for us to just let our guard down and become the therapist or become, like used and abused. And we need to be careful about that. I mean, even we see Jesus set boundaries in hospitality when he would perform a miracle or when he would teach a sermon. He would then go away for sometimes days and spend that time in solitude with the Lord. And so I think that, setting those boundaries, I'm so glad you brought that up because it's not just a physical boundary, but there's also emotional and spiritual boundaries we need to set as well.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that because we will often pray a little prayer when people leave, like, God, we just shake off anything that's not from you. We ask you to send it far away from us. I don't even know where we learned that, but we all have our stuff that we're dealing with. And part of our vision for hospitality has also been inviting people in to do marriage coaching or inviting people in to, to pray with them or pray with their kids. And so and not to say, like, people we all have our stuff. Do you know what I mean? We all have our stuff that we're dealing with. And so it's not to say that everyone who comes in our house has some demon crawling on them, but it's just to say that we are a family. Our home is our shelter, our refuge. And so we are going to be proactive spiritually to sort of like cleanse the atmosphere in a sense, especially after we've done some kind of, heavy duty ministry where stuff is coming up. And, that might, might not or might apply to anybody else, but I think just being, kind of being, like you said, having some boundaries spiritually, physically, uh, we prioritize our family, sometimes maybe even to a fault. So we've never been the people who just have people coming over every night or never take a vacation by ourselves. But I think there are families where that might be a boundary that you have to set, that you're like, okay, actually, my husband's never getting attention because I have girlfriends coming over every night to rehash the day, and I should probably spend some time with my husband. Or, my kids are like running ragged all the time because I'm just constantly hosting, and we're never getting some downtime as a family. So I think those are maybe some things to look at too. Like, what what is life-giving for your whole family, not just you, because you might be so social that you love having people over every night. The rest of your family might be really suffering through that.
Yeah. And then the spiritual boundary of things in that, we know that I used to have a community group and we would recite Philippians 4:8 at the beginning of every, because we had the worst habit of just gabbing and gossiping and just talking about our community and just like, did you hear about this or did you hear about that? And not like in a malicious way, but just in like, that is not true or noble or right or whole. Like, we need to be thinking on those things. And so it was such a great reminder that like anytime we are together, we would recite Philippians 4:8 at the very beginning. And that sounds like cultish. That sounds like seance or something, but it wasn't like that. It was very naive, I guess you could say. But it was like so good because when we did that, our conversation always revolved around each other and affirmation and encouragement. It was always so life giving. And when we would forget to center our evenings around that, let me tell you, we could gab. And so it's just like one of those things like maybe that's something for your household that you set, maybe you write a family creed, maybe you write, a scripture, at the table and say, okay, this is the scripture that anytime we sit at this table, we are going to remind ourselves and center ourselves around the Lord. And everything will be encouraging and affirming and, all that. I used to have a teacher in high school, and he said that my kids aren't old enough for this, but he said that anytime they sat at the table, his kids knew they could confess anything and not get in trouble. And that but if he found out about it and he had to confront them away from the table, that there would be consequences and they would, it would be worse off for them. And so their table became somewhat of a confessional moment. And I love that thought that we can come to the table to confess. And even if it's not necessarily to Jesus, but to our family and say, like, I did this, or I need help with this, or because when the table was first created in Exodus, it was like it was created in the throne room after the Ark of the Covenant. And the Lord said, I want to come and meet you here. And at that point, the temple was for confession, it was for sacrifice. And so I love that. I've always loved that image of the home, the center of the home being the table, and the table being a place of confession and just encouragement around that.
Yeah, the picture of the table being this place of meeting God,
Yeah.
whether for whatever it is you need. I love that. Such a beautiful reminder. And I love also that you talked about reading scripture as part of your gathering, because
Yeah.
that was one of the beautiful things about the Benedictines I write about in Habits for a Sacred Home, is that they kept their routines going. Like, they opened their doors to strangers, but they didn't stop their daily reading of the Psalms, and they didn't stop their daily meal times. Like, things kept rolling along in that beautiful way. And that's part of how we do become a lighthouse, a city set on a hill, is that we, let your light so shine before men, they see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. So it's just part of showing the light of Jesus, that we continue being loving and present to our kids when we have people over, that we continue, if we have a family evening routine of praying at the table or reading a psalm together, we continue doing that, that these beautiful habits can become part of our routine even when people are over. And so our families grow, but other families grow. And Corey Ten Boom illustrated this so beautifully in her book, The Hiding Place. Like, their family was constantly hosting people for whatever meager meal, and at every meal they read scripture. I just loved that picture. Well, your book is Let the Biscuits Burn.
It is.
Tell us where we can find you, Abby.
I'm over on Instagram, abby.kuykendall. I'm sure you're going to have my name spelled out in the show notes or on the show title, but it is quite the doozy, spelled Kirkendall, or sounds like Kirkendall. I have this really fun. I started this during the pre-orders for my book and I have loved it. And so we are going to continue it, but it is a text message with me. And you can text 501-833-6045. You can text the word biscuits, and you can, that kind of like enters you into my text message. It's a kind of like a Facebook group, but it's not a group. It's just one-on-one, you and me. But I have loved having conversations with everyone that has pre-ordered the book, and they've asked questions and they've asked for recipes. And it's just been so life-giving that I'm like, why stop? Let's just keep it going. So 501-833-6045, text biscuits and we can chat. But I'm also on Instagram, so you can go find me there too.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much for sharing your insights today. I loved this conversation. I know families are going to be encouraged as they listen and find your book.